So the Grammys were yesterday or the early hours of today, depending on where you live. I think with time, I've learned to let go of the emotion I once attached to these events. And as I've done that, I begin to see these events in two different ways. The first way, it's an event held by often popular musicians for musicians. It's as simple as that. The second way, different artists get to feel the validation of their colleagues, many of whom experience this for the first time. Okay, so best new artist, for instance. So for the first time in a long time, I don't have any staunch disagreements with any of the picks they've made. I'm happy for everyone who's received honors. That said, I've been taking fleeting glances at my Instagram feed throughout today, and from the reactions I've seen, there are two conversations I want to have. Before I begin, I want to make it clear that I do not intend to come off as condescending or insulting in any negative way at all. I'm just trying to analyze logical inconsistencies and shortcomings that I've observed. So, the first conversation, Davido and the Grammys. I'm from Nigeria, so every other post of late has been something to the effect of Davido was robbed or the Grammys are a humiliation ritual for Nigerians. Now, mind you, Thames has two Grammys. In fact, the category that everyone is up in arms was won by Thames just the year prior. So this has me wondering how exactly some of our minds work when Thames, a Nigerian, wins, right? It's she deserved and the Grammys can't deny quality. But when Tyler or a non-Nigerian wins, it's automatically a rigged affair. Like using this scenario as a parallel for other events in our society, are our elections rigged only when our preferred candidates don't win? Of course, there have been substantial allegations of electoral malpractice. The statement just assumes that all things being equal, we are presented with unpalatable outcomes. And as I said, I didn't have any emotional investment in the awards this time. So I personally am not in a state of despair over this result. I am, however, surprised by how brazen people are with clear-cut logical inconsistency. There are even rumors going around that Davido will no longer submit his music for Grammy consideration. And just like I said with The Weeknd back in 2020, it's simply your choice. And by your choice, I mean the artist's choice. I don't think you ought to get angry over a group of people not liking your music enough for a win when they liked it enough for previous nominations and even wins in the case of The Weeknd. Unless you have insider information regarding unjustifiable and tangibly corrupt practices, your actions come off as I'm hot that I wasn't mentioned. It's not like the Billboard Awards where the accolades are given based on commercial success. With the Grammys, there are a plethora of records that underperform commercially but manage to win awards regardless. Based on that, there ought to not be a concrete reason, in my view, that an artist should be offended over a loss. This, however, shouldn't breed the Grammys are pointless conversation, okay? If they are pointless to the artist, then the logic ought to be from the roots, the submissions. It's not when you've submitted, you got nominated, and then you lose that they all of a sudden become pointless or corrupt. You benefited from the pointless corruption up until it didn't favor you as expected. So to the fans whose favorite artist lost, I get it, honestly. I was once there. I remember my eyes nearly popping out of my head when Bjork lost the Best Alternative Music Album to Beck's Colors album. I have too many instances like this to recount, but with time, I got to understand that it's simply an affair of artists voting for other artists and not a determinant of quality per se. Only you, the listener, can determine how good something sounds to you. Before I enter the second conversation, I have a bit of a linking conversation of some sort. So let's call this conversation 1.5. Come award season, there's always talk of X entity has Y number of accolades, but Z entity has none. Losing sleep over the number of accolades an artist has is, in my opinion, pointless. Even when I had a stronger emotional investment in the Grammys, I never cared for the number per se. My logic at the time was I listened to all the records, yes, all, and I'd have mental selections for who I felt the best in the different categories were. So I would only get sad when I saw something that I felt wasn't exactly the best in its line of being recognized instead. The amount of Grammys an artist has wasn't ever really a selling point for me. Dare I say, it begs the question, how exactly does said artist have so many Grammys? That your favorite artist doesn't have any Grammys doesn't mean their music is inherently inferior. You can acknowledge this without having to cope with comments like F the Grammys. When you understand how the institutions work, you'll come to realize that there's very little or even nothing to be angry about concerning the Grammys. So that's it. Nicki Minaj, for example, has 12 nominations with 0 wins. But that doesn't mean she's been actively skipped by voters. The claims that her fate was caused by her 2012 performance are, in my view, completely unfounded because she received multiple nominations afterward. It's just the case that with every nomination instance, there were artists that the voting members considered more deserving of recognition. I've actually looked at each nomination she's lost and coincidentally agree with all of them. Let's go over them for good measure, right? So at the 53rd Annual Grammy Awards in 2011, we have Best Rap Performance by a Duo or Group, which went on to the next one by Jay-Z and Swiss Beats. But she was nominated with Ludacris for My Chick Bad. Then at the 54th in 2012, she lost Best New Artist to Bon Iver, which again is fair to me. Best Rap Album, Pink Friday, lost to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, a highly acclaimed record. Popular music website Pitchfork is one of the few records that has a 10 on the website. You know, this album was everywhere. It received extreme amounts of acclaim, irrespective of what Kanye West had done just the year prior. So in Best Rap Performance, the same year, she had Moment for Life with Drake, which lost to Jay-Z and Kanye West's Otis, which is another highly acclaimed track and personal favorite of mine. Album of the Year as a featured artist on Rihanna's Loud, she lost to 21. I mean, okay, so at the 57th Grammy Awards in 2015, she lost Best Rap Song for Anaconda. She lost that to Kendrick Lamar's I. Again, choice that I agree with. This is the only one that I will say we can have an argument. Best Pop Duo Group Performance for Bang Bang with Jessie J and Ariana Grande. That lost to A Great Big World and Christina Aguilera Say Something. Now, I'm saying we can have an argument and not necessarily that the choice is invalid. Now, at the 58th Annual Grammy Awards in 2016, she lost Best Rap Album for The Pink Prince to Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. Again, because this To Pimp a Butterfly is another album that sits highly in the upper echelon of rap albums of all times, okay? Then Best Rap Performance, Truffle Butter lost to Kendrick Lamar's Alright again. Alright? Alright, by the way, Pitchfork named it as the best song outright of the past decade. So Alright is another song that sits highly in the upper echelon of rap releases over the past couple of years and of all time. Then she lost Best Rap Song Collaboration for Only with Chris Brown, Drake, and Lil Wayne to Kendrick Lamar's These Walls collaboration. Again, that's a choice that I agree with. Then there's a bit of a gap, like an 8-year gap between award ceremonies. In between that gap, we have famously Cardi B's win for Best Rap Album in a year that she wasn't nominated. Again, I am one of the 12 people, I suppose, on the internet that agrees with the Grammys choice that year. But we come to 2024, which is the 66th annual Grammy Awards. For the song she did for the Barbie soundtrack, she was nominated for Best Rap Song and Best Song Written for Visual Media. For Best Rap Song, she lost to Killer Mike's Scientists and Engineers, which is a very good track. It features Andre 3000, Future, and Erin Allen Kane. Then for Best Song Written for Visual Media, of course, that lost to Billie Eilish's What Was I Made For from the same album, mind you. It's a compilation soundtrack. So, in my view, these are all quality efforts, and there isn't any tangible reason to be disgruntled over any of this. It's just a matter of time and chance. Nicki Minaj, however, does bring me to a different and arguably more pressing conversation. So, the second conversation, Nicki Minaj and the genesis of a cult. In yet another array of tweets published during the airing of the Grammy ceremony, Nicki Minaj has achieved the following. 1. Levying allegations of undisclosed relationships against the Grammys host Trevor Noah. 2. Levying allegations of undisclosed gender identity against Chrissy Teigen, John Legend's wife. 3. Stating the Democrats' Party is plagued with actors who engage in child sacrifice among a host of other criminal activities. 4. Advising viewers of the same tweet to no longer vote for Democrats. And 5. Stating that Jay-Z is a child predator, among other things. Now, there are two fronts from which I want to dissect all of this. But before I continue, I believe it is important to restate that none of my comments come from a place of malice, nor am I acting in bad faith. Should my actions be read negatively or uninformed, I would sincerely appreciate your corrections in the comments. I am of the belief that Nicki Minaj, like most people, is doing the things she feels she needs to do as a morally upright person who seeks the betterment of herself, her family, her community, her fans, and society at large. I maintain the belief that, though it may at times seem contrary, she is acting in good faith. My two angles on this topic: Nicki's actions themselves, and 2, Nicki's fans. So angle 1, Nicki's actions. Of the 5 things I listed, I feel it's safe to say the first 2 are clear instances of bullying. Now, before you're tempted to say action begets action, or she's responded so she's the bad guy, hold on. Compare the nature of the things being said. Trevor's comments could be described as truth-based satire. Nicki Minaj, of late, has been seen publicly with Donald Trump. Satire, humor that highlights a real situation to make a point. Nicki Minaj's response, on the other hand, can be described as 2 things: ad hominem attack and a smear. Ad hominem attack, attacking the person instead of addressing the joke or argument. Smear, an attempt to damage someone's image using unproven or false claims. It's not an attempt to damage, you might say. Then why did she bring it up in the manner she did? Okay, here's the exact comment for context. Trevor refuses to come out of the closet when everyone in the industry knows his boyfriend, allegedly. Let's analyze this and get in somewhere. The comment qualifies as a smear because it introduces an unverified claim about a person's private life and presents it as a concealed truth rather than an opinion or humor. Unlike satire, which draws from observable public facts, okay, The statement relies on innuendo, everybody in the industry knows, and implied insider knowledge to frame the subject as dishonest or deceptive. The use of allegedly does not mitigate the harm, as it still plants a factual accusation in the audience's mind without evidence. So, this is the point. By shifting the focus from a public action to a purportedly hidden personal identity and moral failing, the comment functions not as a rebuttal. So it's not a rebuttal or a joke, or it's not action begetting action, but as a reputational attack. So the subtext isn't just a random declaration of his sexuality. Now, mind you, this is generally considered a private matter by today's ethical framework. It's also a slight hint at him being a deceptive individual overall. The same can be said about her comments on Chrissy Teigen, only that she's making allegations about gender identity in that instance. So with these two comments, they aren't instances of action begets action. No. She wasn't made or presented falsely as the bad guy, but rather she became the bad guy. You understand? Then we have comments about the Democrats and Jay-Z. Again, these are smear tactics because they are currently not proven to be true, but brought up as a means to an end regardless. Now, pay attention. Notice I said currently not proven to be true are not lies. She and the parties involved are the only ones who can verify the truth behind certain claims. But I would like to point out something rather sinister that the fourth action in my list of observations does. Actions 3 and 4 were achieved with one tweet, but it bears highlighting as separate points. This is a tactic that people who often are on the political right wing or identify as conservative use frequently to present their core agenda. Am I saying that Nikki framed her tweet in this manner intentionally? Not necessarily. We're at a point where we cannot always prove intent. But as someone who has fallen down the alt-right pipeline before, it was during my deconstruction that I recognized that such statements presented in this specific way can trigger a subconscious agreement with the messenger's overall goal. So here's the tweet for context. Are you understanding that these people have been sacrificing children as a way of gaining and maintaining power? If you ever vote Democrat, again, you're just as soulless as they are and will perish. Maybe it's time for me to do story times, since I was trying not to say what I know, yet they continue to attempt bullying me. Also, I won't be releasing an album until my contract is renegotiated and until I tell you all about the sabotage this Rico is finding out about Billboard. Now, here is an analysis of this tweet. The tweet goes beyond expressing a personal political opinion, and instead it uses fear-based and morally coercive language to pressure people into rejecting the Democratic Party. In a two-party political system, as is the case in the US, discouraging votes for one major party does not create a neutral outcome. It effectively increases the electoral power of the opposing party by shifting or suppressing votes. So as a result, the messaging that urges people to never vote Democrats indirectly supports Republican electoral success, even when it does not explicitly endorse Republican candidates. Republican-led governments have consistently advanced policies that disproportionately harm marginalized groups, including queer individuals, people of color, women, and religious minorities through restrictions on civil rights, bodily autonomy, and legal protections. Therefore, even if the intent of the tweet is framed as a moral or spiritual warning, its real-world effects contribute to political outcomes that predictably result in reduced rights and increased vulnerability for non-majority populations. So I'll leave it there as an analysis of the array of tweets made within the past 24 hours. Now let's talk about angle two, Nicki's fans. So I've seen a lot of fans supporting her regardless of the kinds of actions and comments she's been making. I was tempted to believe that these were bots, but some of these people are people I know personally. Here's my analysis of the situation regarding her fans. Nicki Minaj has cultivated one of the most fiercely devoted fan bases in popular music. It's a community whose loyalty often goes far beyond casual fandom. While passionate support for an artist is expected in today's society, the intensity and social mechanics of this particular fandom can contribute to cult-like group dynamics that are worth unpacking. Many of Nicki Minaj's fans don't just like her music, okay? They appear to identify with her as a symbol of empowerment, defiance, and uniqueness. When fans internalize an artist's persona to that degree, their personal identity becomes fused with the artist's image and narrative. This identity fusion raises emotional stakes in defending her. That's why at times if their actions look as if they are rabid. So it makes the fans more receptive to anything she says. And there's a bit of a group reinforcement loop social phenomenon strengthening at scale here. Fans defend her publicly, they retweet her and amplify her messages, and in the process, newer or more casual followers see the collective defense and adopt it as normative. This creates a sort of feedback loop where loyalty isn't just personal, it's communal. The social reward in the form of likes and viralities comes from exhibiting that loyalty. Over time, this can normalize beliefs that put subsects of society in harm's way, shifting the overturn window. It can silence internal criticism within her fan base. That resembles the early organizational stages of cults, insular reinforcement, social costs of dissent, and shared identities. Now, here are the things that form the basis of a full-scale cult, in my view. Nicki is venerated not just as an entertainer, but as a truth teller or authority on unrelated social issues. So her fans often respond to outside criticism with hostility, aligning themselves with the figure against common opponents. Insiders are differentiated from outsiders, which you can see as the haters, reinforcing group cohesion. Over time, these structural patterns can transform a fan community into something that functions effectively like a cult, even if no one intends it. Let's also talk briefly about the engagement versus ignorance debate. In my view, ignoring this growing situation implies passivity. Therefore, it allows ideas to ferment unchallenged. Constructive engagement, on the other hand, debunks harmful claims publicly. It also signals that harmful narratives have real consequences. Little reminder, by the way, that the large-scale genocidal activities of 1930s Germany didn't occur out of nowhere. It all started with sweet talk like this. Publicly engaging constructively also, I'd argue, supports those inside the group, that's her fan base, who do have doubts but fear backlash. It's important to note that this is not encouraging conflicts, but rather it's responsible social discourse, especially when public health and civic stability are essentially at stake. Nicki Minaj's influence alone doesn't make her fan base a threat, but when intense loyalty and uncritical reinforcements meet the public amplification of harmful ideas, you are left with conditions where cultic dynamics take root and unchallenged and harmful narratives gain political traction. The concern isn't the music. Her music isn't a concern, or her specifically as an individual. It's rather the social and psychological ecosystem around the messaging of some of the statements and activities she's done in a public forum. So, here are some closing comments to wrap up this recording. The Grammys aren't something to beat yourself up over. That isn't to say that they should be reduced to irrelevance out of spite. Nicki Minaj is not the devil incarnate some people aim to make her out to be. However, some of her recent public actions demand a beneath surface level examination because of the real harm they have the potential to cause. Also, on a lighter note, listening to Cardi B or other artists she has feuded with publicly as a response to the situation isn't the solution, but rather a contribution to the problem at large. We ought to be careful not to deify people in general. And that's it. Do let me know what you think. I had to redo this because your original recording was over an hour long and I was pointing in way too many directions at once. So hopefully this format works better. Be sure to point out mistakes that I might have made in the course of this recording. Ultimately, I make them so I can open up the thoughts I have to scrutiny. I can't possibly know it all, so your comments are much welcome. Thank you.